I just want to comment a little bit about the Gibraltar issue that is going on at the moment. It's sort of being reared again because of Article 50. And there were concerns from the British side that it was going to be used as a bargaining chip with the EU. The British perspective is that it's an issue, a bilateral issue between two countries, the United Kingdom and Spain, and not the United Kingdom and the rest of the European Union. It's escalated a little bit because Lord Howard, Michael Howard, the former Conservative leader, has suggested Theresa May would go to war over the Falklands the way Margaret Thatcher did. Excuse me, you see how I'm crossing that over. That Theresa May would go to war over Gibraltar the way Margaret Thatcher did over the Falklands. And this was kind of exacerbated a little bit by the Defence Secretary, Michael Fallon. But Theresa May herself has literally laughed this off. She says she really tried to downplay this. From the Spanish perspective, the Spanish Foreign Minister, I believe, said that for a nation usually seen as being quite level-headed, we were a bit, forget the term he used, we overreacted a little bit. That wasn't the way he described it, but along those lines. Here's the thing, I'm not overly concerned about Gibraltar. I do think Michael Howard's comments were ridiculously irresponsible at this particular moment. I mean, I absolutely agree that neither Spain or the rest of the EU should use this as a bargaining chip. Say, we'll keep Gibraltar if you leave the EU, or use that as a sort of way to attack the British position. Because two democratic referendums, 1967 and 2002, showed that the Gibraltarians clearly saw themselves as British. It's been in British control since the War of the Spanish Succession. Now, I think there's a big difference between Gibraltar and the Falklands, and this is why. In the case of the Falklands, you had a military dictatorship under Galtieri invaded the islands and tried to subjugate the islanders against their will. Britain came in as a liberating force, and I believe it was morally justified. There are some on the left who believe it was an excuse for Margaret Thatcher. Probably it was good timing for her. Before the war, her approval ratings were very low. After the war, they were very high. So, often that is the case. We're now on the 35th anniversary of the Falklands War. Time magazine had a famous article saying the Empire Strikes Back. Well, I think the dispute around the Falklands are much deeper and much more bitter than Gibraltar. I haven't seen very many Spaniards get animated in a way that Argentines do over the Falklands, the Malvinas as they call them. The reason I take the view I do on the Falklands is not because I'm British. People might say, well, you're biased, you're British. Actually, my reasoning is simply that is the democratic will of the people. If the islanders themselves indicated that they wanted to be under Argentine rule, I would say, okay, we need to respect that and give it up. But it's a big mistake for the UN to see this as decolonisation, because it isn't a case that these are people being held against their will, against, the British, against British domination. These are people who, almost to a man and woman, I think it's 99%, identify as British. Now, geographically, of course, it's much closer to Argentina, I get that. But democratic will must count for something. Argentina has supposedly made a transition to democracy, so they should respect the democratic will of the islanders. I think it's unlikely that they would try to invade the islands again. For one thing, they lost last time militarily. And even today, we may not quite have the sort of numbers that we had in 1982. But if you compare both countries, Argentina and the United Kingdom, we are still a far more dominant military force. Certainly, in that sort of situation, Argentina would get support from probably most of South America. I don't think Colombia, Chile, I don't know about, because obviously there's a new leadership now than there was in 1982. But they would certainly offer moral support to the Argentine side because of the Latin American Brotherhood. Um, a Spanish friend of mine made a comment yesterday saying he supported the Malvinas, and he made the point that it was because of their Argentine brothers. Now, this is an interesting side effect of Brexit because in 1982, I think the Franco dictatorship had been overthrown in 76, not quite sure, 75, 76. But one of the things I think was strong about the EU is that it was absolutely inconceivable that two nation states would go to war. And I think that Spain always had this thing. On one hand, Argentina is their Latin brothers. On the other hand, Britain was a European partner. Um, Now that we're out of the EU, I don't know, the Spanish may feel we're more distant now. Who knows? Um, as for Gibraltar, I really, really doubt that there is going to be any escalation over this. You know, I know a Spanish lady I'm friends with on Facebook, and she had a meme, have we gone to war over Gibraltar yet? And it was actually quite light-hearted because very, 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 very few people in either Spain or Britain conceive such a thing happening. The Prime Minister was laughing about it. I very much doubt Mariano Rajoy takes this seriously. There will be disputes. It is a territorial dispute, but I don't think it's anywhere near as tense as the Falklands thing is. And even the Falklands, it's highly unlikely there will be another war over that situation. Because the only way that Argentina could reclaim the islands is by force. Then they would be seen as the aggressors. Now, you contrast the situation between Britain and Spain with the situation in the South China Sea, which is far, far, far more tense. Britain and Spain are nations that heavily rely on mutual trade. About 1 million Britons at least, might be a lot more than that in fact, live in Spain. There's a large number of Spaniards living in Britain. There will be disagreements, but I cannot see a situation where there will be really nationalistic sentiments on this the way there was. I mean, in Argentina, even today, there's very strong nationalism around Malvinas. There is in Britain to an extent that people will say the Falklands are British, but partly because we won the conflict, I don't think we're overly worried about Argentina's position because, like I said, if the only way they can have the islands is by force, then the international community would have to see it for what it is, aggression. Um, I think it's a mistake for the UN to include the Falklands in the list of non-self-governing dependencies that are, under the decolonization program because the Falklands are not, a colony. They're not an area that is being subjugated to British rule. It's people who've made it clear that they identify themselves as British. And it's the same with Gibraltar. I think it's unfortunate that this has come about, but I really don't. I mean, the chances of war, I think, are about. I think there is a stronger chance of Abu Baghdadi of ISIS um, renouncing violence and saying he has liberal views on gay rights. I think there's a stronger chance of that happening than Britain and Spain going to war over Gibraltar. Um, so I'm not at all worried about it. Although it's interesting that this has developed. I think Hard's comments are ridiculous. I mean, I support the British argument on the grounds that, again, like the Falklands Islanders, or in this case, the people on the rock, have made clear their views. I don't think there's a great deal of people in Spain who care that much about this. Certainly not the same sort of emotional response as we see in Argentina over the Falklands. But what I would say to any Spanish viewers is don't worry about it. Britain has no appetite for war. I'm sure Madrid doesn't either. Just one point on Anglo-Spanish relations too. Some of the press today was indicating that Spain has changed its position on Scotland. That's not true. I think it's hyperbole. from what I can see, the only thing that they have changed is saying that they apparently before they had the position that Scotland couldn't join the EU. They haven't changed that much. All they've said now is that Scotland would still have to go through the process of joining the EU, as any other member state would have to do. I saw a bit of an interview with the Catalan separatist leader. Obviously, the Spanish don't want Catalonia to break away, so this is actually a mutual interest for the British and Spanish governments. Neither country wants to be internally broken up. So we may have differences over Brexit, but I think that's an area where we would find common ground. Thank you for watching.